Hello, and welcome to our second event this year, Tech Accelerator, Azure Security and AI Adoption. We are excited to be here today to share how you can incorporate Microsoft security best practices throughout your cloud adoption journey. I'm Uli Hohmann, Corporate Vice President of Microsoft Cloud and AI.
And hi, I'm David Blank-Edelman. I am the SRE Academy Project Lead.
In case you missed our first event, Mastering Azure and AI Adoption, be sure to visit aka.ms/Azure Adoption Event and watch Microsoft and AMD experts take you through technical best practices to successfully migrate, modernize, design, and manage your Azure and AI projects. Today's sessions will go deeper into how you can leverage Microsoft security guidance, products, and tooling throughout your journey, from the time you consider Azure to the point that you're regularly managing and optimizing workloads. The first three sessions cover the security capabilities built into Azure data centers and innovations in hardware security that add extra protection, the embedded security features within Azure's platform and how to use them, advanced strategies to enhance security during your Azure migration. Then we will shift the focus with sessions helping you elevate security in your AI projects. The last three sessions today will cover how to secure your AI environment with Microsoft guidance and tooling, how to design and build secure AI projects using responsible AI principles and the Azure Well-Architected Framework. Last but not least, how Microsoft Defender for Cloud can help protect your AI applications. We are looking forward to sharing these sessions with you, but first, David and I are going to reprise our roles from armchair architects and share our perspectives on how you can take a zero-trust approach to your Azure and AI projects. Also, shameless plug here, to go check out our YouTube series at aka.ms/armchair architects. So let's get started. I'm going to hand off to David to facilitate our conversations today.
I guess we're here, Uli, again to we can't do armchair architects because our good friend Eric is not here. So we have to do armchair architects singular, but I still think that's going to be really good. And I really hope that folks have a chance to take a look at our show as part of the Azure Enablement Show later, because I think they'll appreciate it a great deal. I wanted to talk to you now, since we're in the middle of a security conference. I was reading the blurbs for all the events that are about to go on, all the talks, and they look great. But something that stuck out to me is that as I'm reading it, I'm reading words like crucial, vital, critical, top priority, serious, right? And so my question for you is, I can't argue with any of those words. They're all true about security, but I don't know what someone's going to do when they're faced with things that when everything is that. And so do you have any advice to people on like where to get started, how to think of like a hierarchy? Like how do you get in on this? If everything is crucial and vital and critical, what do you start with and how do you proceed? That's what I'd love to know from you.
Well, first of all, David, thanks for being here with me and trying to effectively not only be the moderator that you always do such a great job, but I would like to tap into your architect know-how as well. And so let's just make it a dialogue while we're missing our friend Eric. But to answer your question and give you some perspective on how I think about this, it depends a little bit where each customer is with respect to what is the most important thing on their journey. And the way I look at it is, if you don't have an identity strategy and a clear identity system, identity providers, clear ways of how employees, partners, and potentially customers or consumers authenticate within your system, a zero-trust architecture will not be possible. Identity is at the core of the zero-trust approach, and therefore you have to have a clear model, operating system, or environment and a clear strategy of how each participant in your ecosystem, from devices to people inside and outside of your organization, shall authenticate and are managed in terms of what rights do they have and how do they show that they are the people that you think they are. And I think that's the fundamental thing. The second thing that I believe every organization needs to really think hard about is how do you go and stay up to date on the security fixes, because part of the zero trust architecture simply says, I don't trust anything, and therefore it has to authenticate to me. And then I will come out and say, well, in order for you to participate in my network, into using my resources, you're going to have to prove that you are up to date with the latest patches, that there is no known vulnerabilities that you are exposed to. And therefore, you have to have a strategy of how you make sure that the devices, the systems that your employees or your partners use are up to date. So there's a patching strategy that you have to have, being able to roll out patches, getting systems up to date, so that at the end of the day, once you ask the device to share what the state of them is, that you can clearly say, here's my requirements for you to participate. And therefore, patching rollout strategies are critical here as well. So identity is the first building block. Patching strategies is the third building block. And then obviously a continuous monitoring capability, so that you understand both internally what's happening, what are the vulnerabilities that you might have in your systems, because there's maybe a patch that didn't get quite deployed, or there is a new vulnerability that has been discovered. Therefore, you need to understand what are the steps to take to make sure that your environment is protected and is end-to-end secured. With those three, you can effectively start to really think about a zero trust architecture. And I would say that that's the critical step to get into a state where your systems are protected and you can go and participate in secure interchanges.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, because security is like it's not a destination. We never, the train never stops at security. You're like, cool, done, right? Like, and so it makes sense to me that you need to start with like who the people are and who the identities are, because you need to be able to reason about who should get to what, or what device should get to what. And then the question is, you have to make sure that the things that you're hoping will only do the right things have been patched. There aren't any vulnerabilities. They aren't another way in at those identities in many ways. And then there's, as I think, as you said, like if you're not doing this in sort of an iterative way, if there's not a feedback loop here, then you'll stop and you'll feel secure, but that will be a false sense of security.
One thing you mentioned that I think is worth double clicking on is everything in a zero trust architecture effectively has identity. Applications, services, devices, any resource you actually use and bring into the scope of your interactions has to have identity and has to pass a test that you devise with respect to its trustworthiness, meaning patch levels, security capabilities you're expecting, and so forth. So it's not just people that lots of people think about when they think about identity. It's also devices, it's services, applications, and so, et cetera.
And can I just ask the classic question about this before we get on to our next topic? Like often we have these conversations as architects about what we build and what we buy, right? And I've come to feel that like building your own security, certainly at the fundamental levels, is like a terrible idea, unless you happen to be a very large organization the size of Microsoft, hiring lots and lots of smart people, right? And so, do you agree with that, or do you think that, like, is there a tipping point in which you're like, I don't want to trust somebody else, I want to build it myself? How do you think about the build versus buy when it comes to zero trust?
Yeah. So the way I think about this is, it's not really a binary conversation. It's not buying or building. There are certain things that nobody should do because it's really hard to get right. For example, custom or hand-rolled cryptography is a terrible idea.
Right.
Just don't even think about it. There has been so many articles about this, so we don't really need to expound on it. An identity management system is something that you also shouldn't be building because, again, it's a very, very important element of an zero trust strategy. And therefore, it cannot be something that is kind of casually built. It has to be done in a professional way. It is one of the core pillars, and therefore, I think that's what you want to buy. But when you also are working as a corporation or an enterprise, you're building applications. And therefore, you need to understand how to bring in the right capabilities, the right libraries, the right encryption or authentication libraries and stuff like that. So you have a responsibility to understand the security or authentication landscape so that at the end of the day, you can make the right choices where you want to build on top of resilient capabilities provided by professional organizations like Microsoft or others, and where you effectively have to utilize or co-build on top of these capabilities so that your applications follow the secure by design principles, meaning you have to understand vulnerabilities in code. You have to understand how to do security in depth or defense in depth, and those kind of things. And therefore, I don't think it's black and white, build or buy. It's buying and relying on professional capabilities that are designed to be secure and provide the capabilities. And then you building into your application developments the right principles, the right frameworks, and the right approaches that effectively can help you make sure that your applications are secure by design.
It also seems to me like, in addition to, when we say this as if it's super easy, like I'll just buy it or I'll just, get it. But when we have situations, which most of the people probably watching this do, where you have multiple environments that you're knitting together, right? It's not just buy it and use it. It's be very deliberate and careful on how you are connecting things, because that's another place where security can go awry. It's not just like I've got a bug in my crypto. It's I didn't turn on this negotiation or do whatever. And so I don't want people to walk away feeling like we're like glibly saying like, oh, just buy it from Microsoft and it'll all just work, because it's not that easy. And I think it's really important to know that we recognize that at Microsoft and generally in the architectural realm, right? That's not super easy. Well, let me talk about another thing that's also in this particular set of events that I think falls under not that easy, but I'm not quite sure what to think about it. So there is a whole section about security and AI coming up. And what I find myself wondering is there something about AI that makes it distinct from a security perspective that we want to pay attention to? Or is it like, oh yeah, this is just another domain. We have lots of other domains that we have to worry about security in. This is just another one and we apply the same stuff that we do over there. Or is there anything special or different when it comes to AI and security that you think people need to pay attention to?
So before we go there, I want to actually add a set of capabilities or thoughts to the piece of the joint responsibilities you mentioned. So I mentioned secure by design. I think that's a key element. So if you write code, if you write solutions, you have to think about secure by design. Lots of capabilities in secure software development lifecycle can help you there. But obviously you have to apply them. You have to use the right frameworks, the right tools. Then obviously there's what's called secure operations, meaning how do you go and make sure that the capabilities you use either in the cloud or on-prem are secured in the right way, meaning you're applying the right hardening strategies, you're applying the firewalls or other policy rules that you want to do so that at the end of the day, the capabilities are utilized in the most secure fashion. Again, you guys all know this least privilege approach, reducing the attack surface. So don't expose everything that might be humanly possible. Hide as much as you can, only expose what's necessary. All of those things come together, and therefore it's a joint responsibility, as David already said. But I think it's worth pointing it out. Now let's go to AI. So AI, in this case, is very special because it is a traditional domain, because it's still application code that runs and systems that run somewhere. So you have to think about operations by design in terms of hardening the environment, making sure that the network is secure, that the identity of those systems is secured and stuff like that, that those systems have identity that actually can be exposed as a service principal and so forth. But then AI gets special, especially generative AI, which is most of what people these days think about when they say AI, is special because a lot of the models that you use, the large language or the language models in general, are effectively black boxes. You really don't know how the model got trained. You don't know what data it got used to train the system. Therefore, you have to treat it with suspicion. And suspicion in two dimensions. The first one is something that we all know and have heard about, which is called hallucinations. Hallucinations effectively say the language model doesn't make up capabilities or stuff. It effectively interpolates and looks at if the patient, for example, if I were in a healthcare scenario, has symptoms 1, 2, 3, it must be true that there's symptom 4. And that's effectively the model saying, I'm projecting and interpolating what's happening. And That, of course, is something that is very, very dangerous, especially in things like healthcare or other scenarios where human lives and safety are at risk. Therefore, you have to be suspicious of the input that goes into a model, and you have to be suspicious of the output that comes out of the model. And that's the job then of the application designer to say, okay, I'm going to monitor what comes into the model. So the prompt, as we all know, is effectively an artifact which you can control as the designer of the application. So you can review what's in the prompt, you can add to the prompt, you can constrain more what the prompt is actually looking at, and so forth. Then on the other side, you have the output that the model generates based upon the prompt that eventually reaches the language model. Once the system comes out, you have to effectively say, hey, how do I go and make sure that the system used the right data? How do I make sure that the output that I have here is actually true and it's not hallucinated? And therefore, you have to effectively use another language model to check the output of this specific language model you're using.
Right.
So, for example, I'm sure there's a lot of sessions around Azure Content Safety services in this event. And Azure Content Safety is all about you as the owner of or the application builder being in control of the policies that apply to the specific content that you want the language model A to use, and then B to emit. And you can double check that the sources and the content that's coming out of the model meets your baseline requirements for, how do we say this, content that's true in the sense of security and safety.
What's interesting to me about this is it occurs to me, just to connect it back to our previous question, was this is not a done deal. It's not like you check it once, so you set up your rules and content safety and you're done, because the model's changing. The data going into the model is for sure changing, right? And so this means we have to be sort of vigilant also from a security perspective, continuously, right? It's like, continuous verification, that sort of thing. Is there,
before you go on, David,
Yeah.
I want to clarify something, because you said something that's could be misinterpreted. So models are changing only when you update the model.
Sure.
So whenever you use a language model, those are compiled or static models. They don't change.
Right.
They only change when you upgrade to the model. There is a lot of innovation in models, in model design and development. Therefore, people want to upgrade the model. But if you are happy with the model that you have and you have secured it, hardened it, and you manage the input and output, then the model is fairly stable and it only changes based upon the input you give. So what's called RAG, and of course the prompts you're using. And so that's where the dynamic comes in. And then obviously on the return side, the model plus the RAG effectively determine what the output ultimately is going to be.
I appreciate that clarification. I was, in fact, referring to the two kinds of ways that things change, right? There's the thing where you upgrade, which happens in security too, where congratulations, I'm now using a new version of .NET or whatever, and it's got its own things associated with it. It's a lot like the old one, but it's not the old one, right? And then there's, as you said, there's the data and the prompts that come through. Well, I think that there's a lot of really interesting things to be said about this that are coming up in this event. So I don't want to keep people from the rest of the event another minute. I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to me. It's always great to talk to you. I look forward to returning to Armchair Architects with you and Eric really soon. And I want to thank everybody for taking the moment to speak to us during this fireside chat. See, there's the fire. Anyway, it was a real pleasure. Thank you, Uli.
Thanks, David. I really appreciate it. Everyone, we have prepared a great event for you all today, packed with practical guidance and demonstrations on how to bring security into every facet of your Azure and AI adoption. Thanks for joining, and please continue watching for more great sessions to come.